I'm really excited. As I said earlier this morning, it's an auspicious day that we get to confirm and reconfirm some members of the Commission on Women, which is so vitally important. One of the many boards and commissions we have, but one of the most effective and just staunch advocates for the role women play in so many arenas in our life and removing barriers and discrimination so that they can do even more. As is said, I'm in a house full of women with my wife, who's an executive and three daughters, and we added a little boy recently. But I know how important it is to make sure we're lifting up and protecting the rights of all people, but particularly women. Sexual harassment in the workplace and harassment is a pervasive problem. 81% of women and 43% of men have experienced sexual harassment. This is according to a 2018 report from NPR. And so we shouldn't have to wait to do something to make sure that they can have the remedy and that we disincentivize this type of harassment and protect people in the workforce. We know that over the last several years, the Me Too movement has brought this to the forefront. Practices that were seemed to be things that you just had to shrug off or deal with that women are still dealing with and men in the workplace. Those are not acceptable and never have been. But we're seeing the laws starting to catch up so that people can have their day in court and that we can disincentivize and in the right way make our workplaces safe and welcoming for everybody. So the goal of this bill, just quickly, is to ensure that we define harassment and sexual harassment, which is not currently defined in our county code, and specifically removing what has developed over time to be a very high bar in our case law of the severe or pervasive standard that you have to meet to prove sexual harassment in the workplace. And I shared before some very extreme cases where that standard was not met. And if I asked anyone today under that circumstance if it should have been, you would have said yes. And so this defines, allows allegations to move forward and be investigated by our Office of Human Rights if a reasonable victim of discrimination would consider the contact to be more than a petty slight, trivial inconvenience, or minor annoyance. So simply put, we're making the workplace more professional, more safe, and more welcoming for everybody. Finally, I'd like to thank the many broad coalition of groups that worked with us and gave us feedback on this bill. I'm just going to name them briefly: the Jewish Coalition Against Domestic Abuse, the Montgomery County Commission for Women, of course, the National Council of Negro Women, the Potomac Valley chapter, Kathy Harris from Cater Parks, Wisner, and Harris, who was very helpful in feedback and personal stories of individuals here in the county and state who have experienced this discrimination, the NAACP Montgomery County chapter, Montgomery Women, the Silver Spring Justice Coalition, the Jews United for Justice, Immigrant Community Services, and Tacoma Park Mobilization, the Women's Democratic Club, the ACLU, Montgomery County, and UJUMA, the National Center on Violence Against Women in the Black Community. So thank you to all of them. Thank you to my bill's co-sponsors, which is the vast majority of the council. And I really appreciate the support and glad we're going to be one of the very first local jurisdictions to take this step and remove this barrier to workforce place harassment and sexual harassment. And finally, Mr. Jim Stowe, Director Stowe, we put a lot on your plate. Appreciate your support, sir. And we're going to make sure that, especially now in this climate, with all the work we're doing, Councilmember Navarro's racial equity bill and racism as a public health crisis and all the many bills that we put on your plate that you're going to have a hand in working to enforce, we need to get you more help. It's heard loud and clear, but thank you for continuing to support these bills because they're important to protect our community. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. President.